Daniel never expected a simple family dinner to unravel everything he thought he understood about the people he trusted most. But from the moment he walked into his parents' home that evening, he sensed something was off. Little glances, small whispers. The kind of subtle tension you only feel when people have already formed an opinion about you before you've even had a chance to speak. He brushed it off at first, assuming it was just another chaotic family gathering. But the uneasy feeling stayed with him as he helped set the table. Careful not to bump into anyone. Careful not to intrude where he wasn't wanted. Dinner started normally, or at least what passed for normal in his family. Overlapping conversations. Everyone trying to out-talk each other. His siblings bragging about promotions, new projects, new plans. And Daniel listening quietly, as he always did. He wasn't the loud one. Wasn't the flashy one. Wasn't the type who needed attention to feel valid. But he did think, maybe foolishly, that his presence still meant something. He tried joining in the conversation once, mentioning a small achievement from work. Nothing big, just something he felt proud of. But his words barely reached the table before someone else talked over him. And he let the moment slip away without pushing back. He told himself it didn't matter. They were just excited. They weren't doing it on purpose, yet the sting of being ignored dug deeper than he wanted to admit. When dessert came out, the kids moved to the living room, phones glowing in their hands, laughter echoing louder than the adults at the table. Daniel wandered in to check on them, more out of habit than anything else, because he had always been the quiet caretaker, the uncle who fixed broken toys, gave gentle advice, and made sure everyone felt heard. That was when his niece, Ava, looked up from her phone, eyes bright with the confidence of someone who never doubted their place in the world, and aimed a small, careless comment straight at him, one that landed harder than she could ever understand. "Why should we listen to you?" she said with a grin. "You're a nobody." She said it so casually, as if it were a harmless joke, a throwaway line meant to entertain the cousins around her, not realizing, or maybe not caring, that words could hit like a punch when delivered without mercy. For a half-second, Daniel froze, waiting for anyone to step in and correct her, to tell her that wasn't a nice thing to say, to remind her that respect mattered. Instead, a ripple of laughter rolled through the room. His siblings laughed. His parents laughed. Even the cousins who barely understood the situation laughed just because everyone else did. It wasn't loud laughter, not even cruel laughter, but it was enough to seal the moment in his memory like a stamp. Daniel managed a small smile, though his face felt stiff, his throat tight, and he nodded as if he were agreeing with a joke he didn't find funny. Inside, something cracked, not with anger but with quiet shock that the people he had supported for years, the people he had defended and helped and stood by, could so easily align themselves against him in a moment that demanded empathy. He wasn't expecting praise, wasn't expecting admiration, but he certainly wasn't expecting to be dismissed so thoughtlessly. The laughter died down, replaced by new conversations, as if nothing had happened, as if those words hadn't sliced into him. He excused himself politely, saying he needed some fresh air, and stepped outside onto the porch, where the evening breeze felt cooler than it should have, almost cold. He stood there for a few minutes, replaying the moment over and over, questioning whether he was being too sensitive, whether he had misunderstood the tone, whether the laughter meant less than it seemed. But deep down, he knew exactly what he felt. Humiliation. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, lingering type that settles into the chest like a weight. When he stepped back inside, no one noticed he had left. That small detail hurt just as much as Ava's words. He moved around the house like a shadow, clearing plates, packing leftovers, doing all the invisible tasks he always did without being asked. He didn't do it for praise, but tonight, each silent chore felt heavier, as if he were trying to prove his worth to people who had already decided he had none. When it came time to leave, He gave short goodbyes, his voice steady but distant, and drove home in silence. His apartment felt unusually small when he arrived, the quiet pressing against him like a reminder that he was truly alone in his hurt. He sat on the couch, staring at the wall, letting the humiliation mix with something he rarely felt: anger. Not explosive anger, not the kind that pushes a person to reckless actions, but a simmering frustration built from years of being overlooked, undervalued, and brushed aside. He had always been the reliable one, the problem solver, the one who stepped in during emergencies with calm solutions while everyone else panicked. He had done it willingly. A leaving family meant support in both directions. But the moment his niece called him a nobody, and the room erupted in laughter, he realized something painfully simple. They didn't see what he contributed. They didn't see the hours he spent helping, the emotional support he gave, the responsibilities he quietly carried. To them, he was background noise, a presence expected but rarely acknowledged. As the night stretched on, Daniel felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity wash over him. Revenge wasn't a word he ever associated with himself, and he didn't want to hurt anyone. But he did want them to understand what he meant to them. He wanted them to recognize the gap he filled, the tasks he managed, the stability he offered. And if understanding required letting them feel his absence, then maybe that was the only choice that would make any difference. He didn't want to be cruel, didn't want to escalate the situation, but he needed them to feel just once the weight he carried every day. That thought settled into his mind like a seed, small but powerful, something that grew the longer he sat with it. He wasn't seeking revenge in a destructive way. He was seeking recognition, a small form of justice, a moment of truth. And as midnight approached, Daniel made a quiet decision he had never made before. Tomorrow he wouldn't show up for them. Not out of spite, but to give them the chance to see what they never noticed. He wasn't going to shout, wasn't going to confront anyone, wasn't going to start an argument. He was simply going to step back and let the natural consequences unfold. Let them realize how much he did. Let them understand the difference between a nobody and the person who held everything together behind the scenes. As he turned off the lights and headed to bed, he felt a flicker of resolve burn stronger than the hurt. Tomorrow would be different. Not because he wanted to punish anyone, but because he finally understood that staying silent only allowed the pattern to continue. And if his family was ever going to see him clearly, the first step was for him to stop hiding in the shadows they had pushed him into. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a sense of control not over them, but over his own story, and that small spark carried him into sleep, preparing him for the morning that would change everything. Daniel woke up earlier than usual the next morning, his mind already racing as if it had been awake long before his body opened its eyes. And he felt a strange mix of calm and tension, the kind that comes right before a major decision. The humiliation from the night before still stung, not as sharply as it had in the moment, but steady enough to remind him why he had chosen to step back. He wasn't planning anything dramatic or cruel. He simply wasn't going to fix anything today, wasn't going to jump in and save everyone from their own disorganization. It was a quiet form of revenge, more like a pause than a strike, but it carried weight because his family relied on him more than they ever admitted. He made coffee without rushing, ignored the buzzing of his phone, and let himself sit in silence for the first time in months. Normally, he would already be sorting through emails from his parents, reminders from his siblings, or tasks they had quietly pushed onto him, but today he set all of it aside. He stepped out of his apartment and walked to a park nearby, the air cool and still, the world moving slowly, in a way he hadn't noticed in a long time. He felt a flicker of guilt, but he pushed it away, telling himself this wasn't cruel. This was necessary. Meanwhile, across town, his family woke to a morning that went wrong almost immediately. His mother realized she had a doctor's appointment she didn't fully understand, one Daniel usually coordinated. His father received a confusing letter in the mail about insurance that Daniel normally handled with ease. His sister tried to access shared files Daniel always organized, but nothing made sense without him. The question started quickly. Did Daniel send the reminders? Has anyone heard from him? Why isn't he answering? They tried to solve small problems on their own, but kept running into roadblocks. All the invisible tasks Daniel had shielded them from suddenly exposed. Panic built in layers, not from danger, but from the realization of how much they depended on him. Even Ava noticed the tension, sensing that something was wrong beyond the usual morning rush. She remembered her comment from the night before, the careless joke she thought was harmless. A tightness grew in her chest as she replayed the laughter that followed. For the first time, she wondered if her words had cut deeper than she intended. She asked her mother whether Daniel was upset, but her mother, too preoccupied with her own stress, didn't answer right away. The family group chat exploded with messages, questions, confusion, worry, but Daniel didn't respond. His silence, once overlooked, now felt impossible to ignore. As the hours passed, the atmosphere in the house shifted from mild worry to genuine concern. Daniel's absence wasn't loud, but it was powerful. His mother tried calling again, her voice shaking as she left another message. His father paced the living room, muttering about how things were falling apart. His siblings argued about who should drive across town to check on him, though none of them moved immediately, each hoping someone else would take responsibility. And through all of it, Ava watched the chaos, guilt growing heavier by the minute. Back at the park, Daniel watched people jog, walk dogs, sip coffee, live simple lives that didn't revolve around constant demands. It felt strange to sit still, to not be needed, to not rush to fix anything. A part of him felt lighter, almost free. But another part, one he had been avoiding, felt uneasy. He didn't want them to panic. He only wanted them to understand. His plan had been simple. Step away, let them face a few problems. Let them see that his presence mattered. But now, as he checked his phone and saw dozens of missed calls and messages, his stomach tightened. This was more than he expected. He felt torn between satisfaction and discomfort. Revenge had seemed small and harmless when he imagined it, but reality had a way of twisting things into knots no one planned for. He read the messages slowly, scanning the panic in every line. And though a part of him felt vindicated finally, they saw his worth. Another part felt the weight of their fear. He wondered if he had gone too far, or if this was the only way they would ever open their eyes. Then another feeling crept in. Shame. Not because he stepped back, but because their worry reminded him of something he had forgotten. He cared about them, even when they didn't show the same care back. His goal wasn't to hurt them, only to shake them. That shaking them clearly hurt more than he imagined. He put his phone down, rubbing his face with both hands, trying to steady himself. He had spent years being the dependable one, the helper, the person who stepped in when no one else did. Now that he wasn't there, everything was unraveling, and he wasn't sure whether to feel proud or sad about that. His internal conflict grew sharper as he watched a family across the park laugh together. He wanted his family to see his value, yes, but he didn't want to become the kind of person who let fear teach lessons. Eventually, he listened to a voicemail from his mother. Her voice cracked with worry, not anger, not annoyance, just fear. Daniel, sweetheart, we're worried. Please call us, please. That voicemail hit harder than anything else had. He sat frozen for a minute, the sound replaying in his head. That wasn't a family laughing at him. That was a mother afraid her son was hurting. And then the last message came through, one that stood out from all the others. It was from Ava. Short, honest, raw in a way he didn't expect from her. "Uncle Daniel, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't think before I spoke. No one should have laughed. Can you come home?" Her words weren't polished, weren't dramatic, but they were real. And realness was something Daniel had been craving from his family for a long time. He felt his anger untangle slightly, replaced with something softer, something he didn't want to name yet. He stood up from the bench, pacing slowly as he tried to understand what he felt. This wasn't the victory he imagined. This wasn't the revenge he thought would satisfy him. Instead, it left him with more questions than answers, questions about himself, about them, about the cost of being silent for so long. Should he keep his distance a little longer? Make the lessons stick? Make them sit with the consequences? Or should he go home and talk, really talk, for the first time in years? His heart tugged in both directions. Revenge felt sharp but fragile. Healing felt distant but necessary. He didn't want to lose himself in bitterness, but he didn't want to be dismissed again either. He walked around the park, replaying every moment from last night, the insult, the laughter, the way he had felt invisible, and each memory pulled at part of him. Yet every message on his phone pulled at another part. He thought of how often he had swallowed his feelings, how many times he bit back words to keep peace, how long he had let others define him without speaking up. Maybe the real conflict wasn't about his family at all. Maybe it was inside him. Maybe he needed to understand why being overlooked hurt so badly, and why he kept giving without asking for anything in return. His self-worth had become tied to being useful, and when they dismissed him, it felt like he became nothing. But was that who he really was? A tool? A helper? A background character in their lives? Or was he someone who deserved respect simply by being himself, not because of what he did for them? These thoughts came faster, sharper, and he realized he wasn't fighting his family anymore. He was fighting the version of himself who stayed silent too long. He needed to speak up, not through revenge, not through silence, but through honesty. Still, he wasn't ready to go home yet. He needed a few more moments to breathe, to settle, to understand what he wanted the outcome to be. He wasn't choosing between revenge and forgiveness. He was choosing who he wanted to become after this moment. After another long walk around the park, Daniel finally sat back down and closed his eyes. He felt the rush of morning fade into a strange clarity. He didn't want to be feared, and he didn't want to be pitied. He wanted to be understood. And maybe, just maybe, his family was finally ready to understand. He opened his eyes, looked at his phone one more time, and let out a slow breath. He hadn't made a decision yet, but the storm inside him was starting to quiet just enough for the next step to appear. Daniel stood at the edge of the park for several long seconds, feeling the world rush around him while his thoughts tried to settle into something clear enough to follow. And even though he still felt the sting of last night, the panic of this morning, and the confusion of his own emotions, he knew he couldn't sit in silence forever. He started walking, not fast, but with the steady determination of someone who had accepted that a moment of truth was waiting for him, whether he was ready for it or not. Each step toward his parents' home felt heavier than the last, because this wasn't just a visit. It was a confrontation with everything he had avoided saying for years. By the time he reached the front door, his heart was pounding as if preparing for a fight, even though he didn't want to fight at all. He wanted clarity, understanding, maybe even healing, but none of that could happen until he opened the door. Inside, the house was filled with anxious voices, his father pacing the hallway, his mother clutching her phone, his siblings arguing quietly in the kitchen, and Ava sitting on the couch with her hands knotted together, eyes red from crying. The moment they saw him, everything stopped, as if someone had pressed pause on the chaos. His mother rushed to him first, wrapping her arms around him in a desperate, relieved hug, whispering, "Thank goodness. You're okay. And for a moment Daniel let himself sink into it, feeling the warmth, feeling the fear beneath it, feeling the truth that they hadn't meant to hurt him, even if they had. His father stepped forward next, his usually stern face softened with worry, saying how everything fell apart without him, and how they didn't realize how much he handled until it was suddenly missing. His siblings apologized in quick, breathless sentences, stumbling over their guilt, trying to cover years of oversight in a matter of seconds. But the room fell silent when Ava stood up, her small voice barely carrying across the space as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Uncle Daniel." She walked toward him slowly, like she wasn't sure she deserved the chance to stand in front of him. And when she reached him, she lifted her eyes, full of regret instead of the confidence she wore the night before. "I shouldn't have said that," she said. "I didn't think it would hurt you. I didn't know everyone would laugh. I didn't know." She stopped because she didn't know how to explain the carelessness of a moment that spiraled into something bigger than she imagined. Daniel knelt so they were eye level, feeling the weight of being seen, and seeing her, in a way that cut through all the noise. "Words matter," he said gently. "Even when we don't mean them to. They stick. They shape the way people feel." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, and he felt his anger soften even more. He didn't want her to carry guilt forever. He wanted her to learn from it. Behind him, his family waited, unsure of what he would say next, unsure whether the damage could be undone. And this was the moment, the critical moment where revenge, healing, and identity collided inside him, demanding a choice. He could lash out and let them feel the full force of everything he had buried for years. He could step back again and watch them scramble a little longer. Or he could speak honestly and finally change the pattern that had trapped them all. The temptation to release the frustration he had swallowed for so long flickered through him, sharp and tempting, but as he looked around, he realized something important. They weren't laughing now. They were listening. Really listening. And he had waited years for a moment like this. So he stood slowly, feeling the room tighten with anticipation, and began to speak not angrily, not bitterly, but with the calm clarity of someone who had finally found his voice. He told them how last night made him feel invisible, how the laughter stung deeper because it came from people he trusted, how he had spent years being the reliable one, the helper, the quiet backbone of the family, and how it hurt to realize they never fully saw the effort he put into keeping everything running smoothly. He didn't accuse. He explained. He didn't blame. He expressed. And for the first time, no one interrupted him. No one brushed off his feelings. No one laughed. They stood in the truth of his words because his honesty left no room for denial. When he finished, the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with awareness, with understanding, with the kind of recognition he had wanted for so long. His father stepped forward first, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "We didn't realize how much we depended on you," he said. "That's our fault. You shouldn't have had to carry so much alone." His mother nodded, tears welling in her eyes as she apologized for laughing, admitting she didn't know why she had done it, only that she regretted it the moment it happened. His siblings echoed the apology, each offering their own version of remorse, some honest, some awkward, all heartfelt in their own ways. And Ava, still standing close to him, whispered one more soft, trembling, "I'm really sorry." In that moment, Daniel felt something shift inside him, not forgiveness exactly, but the opening of a door toward it. He knew healing wouldn't happen instantly. One apology couldn't erase years of being taken for granted. But this was a start, and sometimes a start was enough. Still, the final choice hadn't fully settled in him yet. Did he walk away from revenge entirely, now that they understood? Or did he let them sit with the consequences a bit longer? As he looked around the room, he realized that true revenge, the emotional kind, the kind that leaves permanent scars, wouldn't make him feel better. Hurting them now wouldn't fix what he felt last night. It would only add more damage to a family already struggling to communicate. What he truly wanted wasn't revenge. It was value, respect, recognition. And he was finally getting that. So he made his decision not in a dramatic announcement, but in the way he relaxed his shoulders, the way he allowed the tension to ease out of his voice, the way he placed a hand on Ava's back and guided her into a gentle hug. He chose healing. He chose clarity. He chose to step forward instead of pulling away. His family seemed to feel the shift instantly, relief sweeping through the room like a warm breeze after a storm. They moved together into the living room, talking openly for the first time in years, not about chores or schedules or who needed help with what, but about boundaries, respect, communication, and the importance of acknowledging what each person brought into the family. Daniel spoke honestly but without bitterness. His family listened with focus instead of distraction. Even Ava participated, asking questions, apologizing again, promising to think before she spoke in the future. Hours passed before any of them noticed, but instead of feeling drained, Daniel felt lighter, as if a weight he had carried since childhood finally loosened its grip. For the first time, he wasn't just the quiet helper in the background. He was part of the conversation, part of the decision-making, part of the family in a way that felt real and balanced. When he finally left the house later that afternoon, the sky was shifting into a soft, warm glow, and he walked to his car with a clearer mind than he'd had in years. He knew things wouldn't be perfect and old habits didn't disappear overnight, but something fundamental had changed. He had found his voice. They had finally heard it. And the lesson was clear, not just for him, but for his family too. Revenge might feel powerful in the moment, but true strength came from choosing growth over anger, honesty over silence, healing over harm. As Daniel drove home, he realized he didn't need revenge to feel whole. He just needed to be seen. And today he finally was.